I may not be Masahiro Sakurai, but I'm a massive fan of his games and I wanted to rank them. I'll be ranking the games where he played a key development as either a director or game designer. The only game I won't be covering is Sodatete because, first off, I can't even pronounce it, and it's entirely in Japanese and I have no way of playing it. So with all that said, let's get her ranked. And also, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, but more on that later. 13. Kirby's Dreamland. While this may be ranked lowest on the list, that doesn't necessarily make it a bad game, especially considering the technical marvel that it's running on the Game Boy at all. Since this is Kirby's first adventure, it has its limitations. It's not colored, there's no copy abilities, it's fairly laggy, and it takes about 20 minutes to beat the entire thing. But even still, the core concept is still there, and the game introduces us to a lot of the classic Kirby enemies that we're still seeing to this day. And the music is pretty fantastic. In fact, the entire game has continued to be remade in the newer games. And to top it off, Kirby's Dreamland comes with those cute cutscenes before the level starts. Most modern Kirby titles don't do that anymore. 12. Kirby's Adventure. This is a massive step for what came before it. Kirby's Adventure is still the first game to bring us the copy abilities. This one idea is so ingenious and still feels fresh after all these years. It gives you a huge incentive to eat enemies and see if they give you extra powers or not. You feel very dominating in a sense, which is hilarious because you're playing as a little pink blobby guy. I mean, he's eating the freaking cartridge. This man has no bounds. The music is still great. The cutscenes before each world are super charming. It's an all-around great time. The game's biggest issue is once again tied down to the hardware it's on. There's a lot happening on screen, and the NES isn't able to handle it very well, so the game lags quite a bit, especially in the later levels, which is why there's not much reason to play this version when the 3DS Classics version exists. It's the same game, but runs at a smooth frame rate and is an all-around better experience. But Sakurai didn't actively develop that port, so we can't count it, of course. Also new to the series are the sub-games. I don't really care for Crane Fever or Quick Draw, but Egg Catcher is really addicting, especially in the hard difficulties. It gets pretty tough trying to eat all the eggs while avoiding the barrage of bombs. This is an absolute must-play, but just try it on the 3DS instead of the NES. 11. Kirby Air Ride. Sakurai reinvented fighting games, and this time he reinvented racing games. Well, kind of, I guess. I know this is a very beloved game on the GameCube, and believe me, I totally get it. Just look at how adorable and well done the instruction manual is. So much effort and detail was put into this. But when it comes down to it, City Trial is the only decent mode, and that's when you're playing with actual people. The odds of that happening nowadays are slim to none, so I feel like this game isn't as fun as it's made out to be. The main mode is Air Ride, and it's unique alright. You pick from 9 different stages. Yeah, there's only 9, which is an incredibly low amount, and from there you'll race it out. Things get interesting with the vehicles themselves, because they all control differently. And I don't just mean that the stats are different, no, like they fundamentally have strange quirks. The Warp Star is kind of like the all-around normal vehicle, but then the Slick Star can't come to a full stop, but it's really fast. The Wing Star can bounce off the ground after gliding. The Wagon Star doesn't charge. The Swerve Star can't turn unless it completely stops. And every vehicle has these weird quirks. I kind of get the idea of doing this. It makes each vehicle stand out a lot more than a typical vehicle. But the problem is that the changes are too different, and what you're left with is hating how 90% of the stars control and you only use 1 or 2 of them. And then there's the controls. So basically, you use the joystick to move, and then the A button does everything else. Everything else. That includes braking, inhaling, charging, and hitting the speed boost. There are so many buttons on this controller, and you use 1. 1! Why? This is simplifying to the extreme. It just feels awkward to control. And while there are copy abilities, they never seem to make any real impact on the gameplay compared to the items in, say, Mario Kart. So yeah, I've never been a fan of Air Ride. Top Ride is also just okay. You race from a top-down perspective, and I don't know why there's 7 courses to pick from for this one mode because you'll play it a couple times and be done with it. But of course, there's still City Trial, which is what everyone adores. You drive through a city and collect a bunch of abilities which enhance your vehicle. This is pretty awesome. In a weird way, it almost feels like Grand Theft Auto due to the freedom to drive anywhere, but it's Kirbyified. You can also try to build the Dragoon and have the ultimate vehicle, and the environments are well varied. At the end, your abilities are added up and are used for the final challenge, which are random and varied. You might fight King DDD, or hit a target in the air, or just try to jump as high as possible. There's a ton of different scenarios. This gives you a huge incentive to actually find as many abilities as possible, and it's competitive on top of that. So City Trial is incredible, but that's only 1/3 of the whole game. I do have to say though, the menus are pretty damn good. It's funny playing Sakurai's games because you can always tell just by the menu design. It's almost like leaving his personal signature without him even realizing it. 10. Super Smash Bros. This and Mario 64 were my childhood games. I still remember when I first saw the game at like 6 years old. I was visiting some family, and in my cousin's room, the TV was on, and he had the Smash Bros. Character select screen playing. The music really drew me in, and the colorful characters were so mysterious. And a few years later, I got the game for myself and was beyond hooked. I played so much Smash Bros. That I could beat 3 level 9 computers by myself without any trouble. Just the sheer nature of Smash Bros. And its simplicity makes it really easy for anybody to pick up. And no matter what you say about the Smash series, the first game will always have the greatest box art. It's so dynamic and fun, and I love how Link looks scared and Fox says, "Biff." What the heck is Biff? We all know how it works. You beat up your opponents and knock them off the stage when their damage is high enough. It completely changed the concept of what fighting games are, and there's yet to be a true competitor. PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale and Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl made attempts at the formula, but they just don't have the same polish that this franchise does. There's just something so satisfying about Falcon punching with Captain Falcon, or eating enemies with Kirby and getting their abilities. It's a celebration of Nintendo's biggest franchises. Each character's attacks feel natural because they pull attributes from the games they're from. Now, with all that said, this is by far the jankiest Smash to play. It's still a lot of fun, but it has its quirks. It doesn't feel that smooth to move around using an N64 joystick. You can't turn off tap jump, and there really aren't that many stages to fight on. 12 characters is also a pretty small roster, but for the 90s, it was the average size for fighters. I always played as Fox the most, but I had a pretty mean Ness and Mario as well. On top of that is a bunch of items, some of them hailing from other Nintendo games. And I've only talked about multiplayer. There's an entire single player too, which nowadays is kind of barren, but it's still fun to dive into from time to time. The classic mode is a bunch of specialized matches where you'll fight a giant DK, a herd of Yoshi, or get to the end of a stage before time runs out. And of course, you end up fighting things like Master Hand. N64 games sure loved having an emphasis on hands, and I don't know why. And we've also got break the targets and board the platforms. These have personally always been my favorite part of Smash 64. They teach you how to play as each character without feeling like a tutorial. It's got this arcadiness to them as well, trying to optimize your route and all that. It's really too bad that we don't get unique stages in the newer games or just break the targets at all. But there's also kind of like, 80 characters in Smash Bros. Ultimate, so I totally get why these modes were dropped. So all in all, Smash Bros. 64 is still a fun time and worth going back to. But Sakurai really went out of his way to make each sequel more and more insane, so this has to be on the bottom. 9. Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland. Wow, it's Kirby's Adventure again! Although this time, it has the GBA graphical style, and I absolutely adore it. And Kirby is angry on the cover, because of course he is. I totally get why some people would still prefer the original version, but the graphical upgrade and consistent frame rate make it so much better to me. New to Nightmare in Dreamland is Meta Nightmare. This allows you to play the entire game as Meta Knight, and oh my god is this a blast. You wouldn't think it'd be that different, but Meta Knight moves so fluidly and quick, it feels like you're speedrunning through the game. You even have a timer during your playthrough, so you're incentivized to play really fast. The sub-games are also entirely new, which honestly is fine because I only liked Egg Catcher and Kirby's Adventure. You've got Bomb Rally, where you'll smack a bomb around, Samurai Kirby is basically the same as Quick Draw, but it looks nicer, and Kirby's Air Grind has you grinding on rails and getting to the end the quickest. It's overall a better selection of sub-games, and there's also a boss endurance mode, which is essentially a boss rush. And on top of that, you can play this game with 4 people at once. And no, it's not Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, this is Nightmare in Dreamland. Who remembers you can do that with this one? Nintendo Switch Online, this game is calling for you right now. The only drawback to this game is the bosses, because for whatever reason, they have no hit stun and take little to no effort to defeat. So the game is now even easier than before. But it's Kirby, I'm not here to be challenged, I'm here to jam to catchy music, eat some enemies, and watch Kirby dance. 8. Kirby Superstar. This truly is a super video game. So much of what this franchise has today comes from Kirby Superstar. 8 games in one, it says? Well, guess what? It's 9 games. Yep, it's 9 games. Sakurai lied to you, he lied to me, he lied to all of us. How dare he? Although technically, you could combine Spring Breeze, Dynablade, Revenge of Meta Knight, and Milky Way Wishes into one game. Regardless, this is one of the best platformers on the SNES for the sheer variety of things to do. There's tons of staples introduced as well, like the Kirby hats, partner characters, and having multiple attacks with your copy ability. It may sound like no-brainers now, but these were huge inclusions back then. And speaking of abilities, 13 of them were brand new. I just gotta emphasize, like, think about any new Kirby game out there. What, they get like 2 or 3 new abilities? Ooh, super cool. Well, guess what? Superstar cuts the bullshit and says, hey, bitch, take 13 abilities! I know this was still an early era for Kirby and there weren't that many abilities to begin with, but that's still pretty wild. The main games are pretty in-depth and all kind of stand on their own. Spring Breeze recreates the entirety of Kirby's Dreamland levels and adds copy abilities, which is exactly what that original game needed. Dynablade is kind of the same idea, but you fight this big bird at the end. Revenge of Meta Knight is the best one because you run through Halberd, and while that's happening, you can see exactly how Meta Knight and the shipmates are reacting to Kirby in real time. This adds a lot of immersion, and it feels like you're making an actual impact. Milky Way Wishes is bizarre because you only get copy abilities through essences and not enemies. The levels here can also be a bit irritating, but it does have this badass computer virus boss. The only real issue with these games is that it can be hard to see where enemies are coming from, and you'll often get hit by enemies when you enter new areas. Outside of that are a bunch of smaller modes, and also the Great Cave Offensive. This one is really neat as you run through a maze-like area and try to find 60 different treasures. It's a fun change of pace, and one that I'll need to fully complete someday. And on top of that are the smaller modes like Gourmet Race. You basically just race King DDD while eating food. It's surprisingly hectic for what sounds like such a basic concept. There's also the Arena, which is the typical boss rush found in most Kirby games. And there's Megaton Punch, where you'll time your button press to release the strongest punch into the ground, and Samurai Kirby is testing your reaction time. So yeah, it's basically the same thing that's in Kirby Nightmare and Dreamland. Kirby Superstar is excellent for pushing its boundaries and still being incredibly fun. But let's just be real, the DS remake manages to improve on it even more and adds even more game modes. 7. Super Smash Bros. For 3DS. I find it fascinating how everybody was so excited and hyped up for Smash on 3DS, and then the game came out, everyone played it, and then the Wii U version came out, and then no one played it ever again. And frankly, I don't blame anybody. Most other Smash games have a cool hook that are fun to go back to, while this one has Smash Run. Now, Smash Run is a really fun time, of course. You go around this massive map and collect a bunch of stat boosts for your character, and once time is up, you'll compete in a random event which can be as simple as a regular fight, or even just climbing up as high as possible. This mode, as I'm sure you could guess, is very inspired by Kirby Air Ride City Trial mode. Even the stat icons look strikingly similar. And it's a really fun mode, like I said, but that's really the only reason I'm interested in picking this game up again after several years. And that's not to say it isn't complete, because it is. It's got all the characters that the Wii U version has, there's over 40 stages, and there's a bunch of single-player modes. There's just one problem. It's on the 3DS. So you'll mostly play this version by yourself, which is just okay. The stage selection is at least pretty decent. I love that they brought back Corneria and PictoChat 2 since those were always my favorites. And there's some exclusive stages that have never been ported like Rainbow Road and Pac Maze, which are both super creative and a blast to play on. But man, the single player stuff is really lacking beyond Smash Run. Let's see what we got. There's this weird Street Smash mode where you're a circle and you whack around a bunch of other circles. Wow, that was a game mode. Oh, I want to bang around squares next time. Then the other stuff just feels very lackluster. Gone is Target Test, now we have Target Blast, where you'll smack a bomb and hit a bunch of targets like Angry Birds. This is fine and does have some replay value if you're trying to hit every target, but there's only one stage to work with. Then you've got the multi-main smash. It's the same as usual, but instead of fighting polygons, you just fight Miis, which is really unexciting considering you can play as Miis in the base game. The new rival smash is kind of cool though. You have to KO more enemies than your rival, so I'm glad there's something new here. It's nice to see them getting rid of the 15-minute mode as well, because that always felt really excessive and boring. And you've still got the home run contest, of course. Let's see, the classic mode is really strange now. It doesn't really feel like classic mode because of how random the fights are. You'll pick your difficulty along the way, and you can unlock better stuff the harder the fight is. So that's nice and all, but it just feels like I'm doing random versus matches and not a distinct mode. And All-Star makes a comeback, but honestly, there's so many characters now that it's just become a slog to play through. It's nice that there's still trophies to collect though, that's always a fun time, and I love the idea of unlocking custom moves for each character. I know that literally nobody really used the custom moves, but it's still a really neat idea. Also new to the game is equipment, which are badges you can attach to custom fighters to make them stronger, faster, or have better defense. This is again a really fun idea, which worked well in Brawl's Subspace Emissary, but I don't think people really cared to do that in regular versus matches. And there's also way too many of them to get. You know, I kind of feel bad for this game. It's got a lot of content on it, but most of it's really lackluster, and let's not forget, it's on the 3DS! Who's gonna play Smash on the go? 6. Kid Icarus Uprising. I've been intrigued about this game for a decade, and finally, I'm giving it a shot. Kid Icarus Uprising is the rebirth of the series, seeing as it had been 20 years since the last one on the Game Boy, and it's entirely different. Instead of platforming, it's an on-rails shooter where you'll fly or run around completing missions for Palutena. So when I first played this, I had already heard about the whole hand-cramping ordeal and kinda just assumed it wasn't that big of an issue. But after 30 minutes, yes it was, I completely understand what everyone's talking about, and then I got that standout. Oh, thank God we got this, because it helps an extra 5%! Thank you, thank you, thank you! The only way I can describe Uprising's controls is with these two words: intuitively uncomfortable. You run around with a circle pad, aim with a touchscreen, and fire with L. You can also use powers to help out along the way. It all makes sense and works, but it physically hurts to play. And while you can technically use normal buttons, it just doesn't work because the action is so frantic. You really need the touchscreen's extra finesse. It's too bad because otherwise, this is an incredible experience. Going back and forth, flying around, and running on land is awesome. And the cinematic work when you're flying is extremely well done. It almost feels like a crossover between Star Fox and Star Wars. You'll dive through tornadoes, pass through a parting sea, soar around a volcano with spurts of lava bursting all around you. You turn into a dog at one point. You have to literally go to hell and reverse time to find your soul before it's eaten. What's this? Nintendo is publishing a game with an interesting story? That's not allowed. It almost feels unreal how immersive the environments are, although I gotta be honest, the land sections aren't that great. And that's because you turn by sliding the stylus, which would be fine on its own, but we also have to aim with the stylus. So it's super awkward trying to aim your shots and turn at the same time. Again, it's a limitation of the 3DS, and you do get used to it after a while. There's a ton of weapons to pick from too. I don't really know which ones are the best to use, but it's nice that there's such a big selection. The story mode is a ton of fun because of the dialogue between Pit, Palutena, and all the bosses they encounter. Huge props to all the voice actors. They really knocked it out of the park. It feels strange that a Nintendo game has this much focus on a strong narrative. I was really digging it the whole way through, especially when we got to Hades. He's absolutely hysterical, and I love him saying, spoiler alert."
Spoiler alert.
I mean, come on, how can you not love Hades? And even when you finish the game, there's a massive challenge board to take on, so it's got a ton of replay value. I also love how you can move the menu around, which is exactly how Meteos works, and nobody knows that because nobody's played Meteos. But yeah, this game desperately needs a remake. And I already know what they need to do with the controls, so hear me out here. Let us move around as normal with the dual sticks, and use gyro to aim your shots. That's it, that's the perfect solution, or in other words, exactly how Splatoon controls. 5. Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. This is very similar to the 3DS version as you'd expect. You've got all the same characters and modes, but with a lot of extra stuff on top of that. For starters, there's a ton of stages to pick from, with some really great new ones like Woolly World and Super Mario Maker. Orbital Gate Assault is also incredible as a work of art, but man, there's also a ton of bad stages. Just Pac-Land and the Great Cave Offensive. Like, do I really need to say more? Something new to this game, though, is bosses that'll show up on stages. You'll be forced to fight Ridley and Pyrosphere, or the Yellow Devil in Wily Castle. The issue with this is that these bosses are massive nuisances and can't be turned off in the settings, so they kind of ruin the stage. And this is coming from someone that plays Smash Bros. Casually. But there's a lot to pick from. We still have Temple and most of the fan favorites. I also love just Big Battlefield as well. I don't know, it's just kind of funny to me that that's considered a brand new stage. But it's there for a good reason, because 8-player Smash is now a thing. And while it's a cool concept, it's nothing short of sheer chaos, which makes it impossible to play with any sort of coherent strategy. And only a handful of stages work with this many characters. I don't know why they couldn't just increase the size of the other stages, but I'm sure there was a reason it couldn't work. And heck, there's Omega forms of each stage if you really want to get down to the basics. The gameplay in general really starts to feel super fluid compared to what's come before it, and it's nice you can use GameCube controllers with an adapter. The character roster is also pretty insane and really broke the realm of what's possible. I mean, we got Cloud from Final Fantasy, Bayonetta, frickin' Mega Man.
Oh my god! They're adding Mega Man! Holy oh my god!
Smash Bros. Ultimate makes it really easy to forget just how impactful the characters were in Smash for Wii U and 3DS. While we might be missing fan favorites like Wolf and Snake, the selection overall is fantastic. But what about the single-player stuff? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Just trying to find it is a challenge because the menus are horrifically unorganized. The UI itself looks great, but I have a hard time telling where anything is. Like, why is Smash Tour and Challenges not included in the Games and More section? Shouldn't Stage Builder be included in the Vault section like in Brawl? Why is there 2 panels for Solo and Group when they both contain the exact same modes? Why is Amiibo in the Games and More segment? Shouldn't it be with Smash since that's solely used for Smash matches? I could honestly go on and on about the menu, and I feel bad because like I said, the UI looks great, but it's just so complicated and hard to remember where anything is. But beyond that, there's quite a few modes that kind of just boil down to random versus matches. To start, we've got Classic Mode, and the way it works this time is you'll pick a group of fighters, and that's it. There's no theme or consistency outside of fighting a horde of Miis and Master Hand at the end, which is incredibly lame, but at least the bosses get really creative. The harder the difficulty is, the harder the fights get, but also the more forms of Master Core you'll fight. So on top of the hands, you'll typically fight these core bosses, which consist of this random giant figure, a scorpion beast thing, some form with swords, a shadow of yourself, and you even have to make it through Master Fortress on the hardest difficulty. I absolutely love how intense the bosses get. It's really a shame that they're forgotten about, and that's because the classic mode itself is so bare bones and streamlined. The other stuff from the 3DS version is all here too, and is about the same, although Target Blast has 3 stages instead of 1, which is a nice bonus. On top of that is Master and Crazy Orders, and when this game first came out, I played a ton of this mode because it was the best way to unlock custom moves and trophies. They're both pretty similar. With Master Orders, you'll play a customized match and win a reward if you clear it. And Crazy Orders is the same thing, but you'll play matches and try to stay on a win streak for as long as possible. The longer the streak, the more rewards you get in the end. And you also fight Crazy Hand to finish things off. These are fun additions, but once again, they just kind of boil down to playing regular versus matches. Oh, but the event matches are back, which is awesome. But again, these are also like playing regular versus matches. Yeah, it's kind of the theme of Wii U single player. But hey, you might be asking, what about Smash Tour? That one's unique, right? Well, it is definitely unique. You could call it that, but it's not worth playing either because it's somehow the most random and confusing mode for a game I've ever played. You go around this board collecting characters and stat boosts, and along the way you'll use trophies to steal other characters or abilities, or gain new ones. At the end, there's a big match where all the equipment you collected is added up and you have a final big fight with all the characters you grabbed. It's a neat idea and concept, but there is just way too much random crap happening. The trophies you get are completely random, their value is either useless or overpowered, random bosses show up on the board to shake things up, you'll also compete in matches before the very end if you run into someone else, and then the trophies you collect for these can be incredibly unfair in the matches. It's just way too confusing in general. And that really sums up Smash for Wii U. It's a great and well fleshed out multiplayer game, and the online was okay for the time too, but the single player stuff is very mixed. I'm glad they still have masterpieces and tried out some new modes, but it just doesn't feel distinct enough to be seen as something different than what the main multiplayer offers. And the single player stuff is still fun, but I really don't have much desire to come back to them and play again. 4. Meteos. This game is the sole reason I made this video. I love Meteos. In fact, this is one of my favorite games of all time. I mean, just look at the box art. Look how excited the blocks look. Look at them. I had it as a kid and just adored everything about it, so I'm happy to have an excuse to explain how this is one of the best puzzle games out there. Looking at it at first glance might be a tad confusing, so I'll show you the gist of how it works. Like a lot of puzzle games, you need to match 3 or more of the same tile. When this is done, the tiles literally take off into the air and are sent into space. However, the first launch is generally pretty weak, so you need to keep making matches to make the launches stronger and send them to the other planet. You can also send tiles from underneath the launch to help them make matches, and there's some items you can use to clear up your path. If your tiles get stacked to the top for too long, you lose. That is the basic gameplay, and it's incredibly addicting. A good puzzle game needs 2 things, an easy hook and a long-term motive to keep playing and get better and better. Meteos serves both of those purposes perfectly, and the reason we won't see a remake or a port of this probably ever is because you have to use the touchscreen and stylus to play. The pieces only move vertically, and you'll drag them around and also hold this green orb thing to speed up the game when you need more pieces to work with. Every planet has its own distinct look, music, and gravity. Sometimes your launches are slow going, sometimes they're really fast and fall down quickly. It all depends on what planet you're attacking. This not only keeps things fresh in the story mode, but also allows you to find a planet you prefer. And this is not the same as Kirby Air Ride, where every vehicle is vastly different. The changes in Meteos are much more subtle. The music is what really brings it all together. It works in harmony with the gameplay. It's a lot like Tetris 99 or Tetris Effect, where the music will speed up the farther into the game you'll get. For Meteos, it'll add more instruments and get more intense with more pieces on your screen. When you're about to die, the music almost carries a dreadness to it that really heightens the excitement. And the more times you launch a chunk of tiles, the more excited the sound effect for the launch gets. Half the fun is unlocking the planets and soundtracks. When I was a kid, I would go into the sound test and make my own beats with the music. Also, I've got to bring up the final planet, Meteo, basically the boss. Take a good hard look at this thing. Does it remind you of any of Sakurai's other creations, perhaps? Maybe a boss, or yeah, it's basically Darkon's eye. Or at the very least, it must have been inspired by Meteo. You can also tell Sakurai developed this by just looking at the menus. Like I said earlier, all of his menus have this very bold confidence to them, and are just fun to click through. And during the credits, you still play Meteos for fun, and this song is super rewarding. This may be a fairly simple game according to today's standards, but there's really nothing like it. It's super addicting, I can come back to it literally anytime I want, and I think this game is the reason I got so invested in Tetris. It's the perfect time waster, even if there isn't much beyond that. 3. Super Smash Bros. Brawl. This might be a bit of a hot take, but my god do I love Brawl. The gameplay might be a lot slower and a bit on the clunkier side, but there is so much to do. Sakurai really went all out and somehow bested Smash Bros. Melee, which at the time was considered to be a massive step up from Smash 64. Brawl's focus this time was on the single player and online. While the online was a massive mess, I think that has to do with the console itself and not so much under Sakurai's control. The single player stuff, on the other hand, is a huge reason I still come back to this game. The Subspace Emissary. It's by far one of the most ambitious projects I've seen anyone take on. Sakurai took the fighting formula, turned it into an action platformer, and managed to include almost an hour of cutscenes that are all tied together as one cohesive story. What makes it so impressive is that there's over 30 characters ranging from multiple different IPs and worlds. The cutscenes work so well together, and they're still so much fun to watch. Whether that's Link running up this hill at 200 miles an hour, Kirby smashing through a giant laser gun, or Luigi getting scared of a Waddle Dee. These characters are brought to life and surprisingly work well together. There's really only a couple downsides to Subspace Emissary. I do wish the worlds and levels had more areas from the characters themselves, and the Great Maze is a pain in the butt if you don't know what you're doing. But I don't even mind those setbacks. I've played through Subspace Emissary multiple times because it's just that enticing. And that's just one mode. There's so much to do still. You've got Classic and All-Star, which are both very similar to Melee. There's boss battles after beating the campaign, so if you want to fight Rayquaza, PD Piranha, Porky, and the Hands back-to-back, go for it. Event matches are back, and while they aren't quite as creative as they were in Melee, they're still really solid and stand out. Plus, Sakurai threw in co-op event matches, which are just as fun to tackle. You've got the Stage Builder, which is a bit primitive nowadays, but you can still make some fun stuff with it. There's tons of trophies and stickers to unlock. You can use the stickers to power up your characters in the adventure mode. There's masterpieces where you can try samples of the characters' games, a challenge board. It just goes on and on and on. The stage selection this time is pretty solid too. I really enjoy WarioWare Inc. and Lilac Cruise, but as usual, there's some stinkers in here. Port Town Aerodive's cars are way too strong, Rumble Falls is just miserable, and New Pork City is obnoxiously big. But Sakurai tries to cater to everyone, so I think it'd be impossible to like every stage he puts out. I also love how you can pick multiple music tracks and select how often you want to hear them. This was just the beginning of Smash Bros. Becoming a host platform for Nintendo Music. The new characters were huge too. We got Snake and Sonic, plus picks like King Dedede and Wario were awesome inclusions. The only reason Brawl isn't higher on this list comes down to the gameplay. Like I said, it's not bad, but it does feel very slow and a bit simplified for my tastes. 2. Super Smash Bros. Melee. I probably have a bit of a bias with this one because I sunk hundreds of hours into Melee as a kid, but that doesn't stop me from loving and appreciating this game so much. The jump from Smash 64 to Melee was probably the highest the series has ever seen. It looks a million times better, there's twice as many characters, twice as many stages, and a boatload of single-player stuff. But the best part is, of course, the gameplay. Your movement is very fast and nimble, and the single-player stuff is great too. Classic mode returns, we get this new adventure mode, which is half unique fights, but also has these small platforming sections. It's so cool how they're kind of integrated together. All-Star mode makes its first appearance, you can do massive tournaments for the first time, there's a unique target test stage for every character, we got home run contest, and multi-man Melee. The event matches are by far the best in Melee because it really goes out of its way to make each one feel very distinct. You've got a match where you can only win with the Pokeball Pokemon, or you can only KO Nana from the Ice Climbers, or you have to KO Zelda, but only when transformed as Sheep. There are so many cool ideas, and even the most basic ones have their own charm. Every 10 levels, you'll fight a barrage of characters, and after defeating one of them, the stage changes to match with that specific character. That small detail makes a big difference and only happens with Melee's event matches. And let's not forget about the trophy tussles. I so badly want these to come back. And speak of the devil, you'll win some of these trophies by spending coins you'll get from the single-player modes through a lottery system, or you'll get trophies for completing specific tasks throughout the game. A lot of these require a decent amount of effort to get, and while some of it involves grinding coins, a lot of it doesn't. The stages are great too. We got Poke Floats, Corneria, Temple, and a bunch of other classics that we all love. And let's not forget that Melee single-handedly saved the Fire Emblem franchise. Nobody knew who Martha and Roy were before this game came out, and now Nintendo won't shut the hell up about Fire Emblem, yeah! Even though this game had a very fast development of 13 months, every character, stage, and mode feels so carefully crafted and well put together. Even the menus have this awesome 2000 style, and you can fling them around with your C-stick because why not? I'm sure all of you have already played this game, so you don't need me to tell you to play it because you have. And if you haven't, what the hell what are you doing? Go play it. Play the damn game. Have fun. Enjoy it. Or else. 1. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It was kind of a hard decision to put Ultimate as the best Sakurai game over Melee, but with all the extra DLC, it has to be number 1. This is honestly Sakurai's magnum opus. He's clearly put a ton of time, love, and care into this game. It's insane. There's a reason it's officially the best-selling fighting game of all time. It's because it truly is the ultimate version of Smash Bros. It has 86 characters, 114 stages, a massive story mode, over 1,000 spirits, online play, and several single-player modes. I genuinely have no idea how Sakurai can top himself after this. The character roster alone is so beyond impressive, he spoiled us silly. Literally every character from the previous game returned, plus there were 11 new ones in the base game and 12 DLC ones. And these character picks are awesome and go out of their way to cater to everybody. Not everyone's gonna like every character, I mean there's over 80. But since there is that many, you probably like at least one. Or two. And if you don't, you just don't like video games. And that's fine, go read a book. Some new ones were simple additions like Dark Samus, Daisy, and Chrom. Some of these have been heavily requested for literal decades like Ridley, Simon Belmont, Banjo and Kazooie, and King K. Rool. Some choices were weird as hell like Joker and Piranha Plant, and then there's Steve Minecraft. Oh, and also Sans Undertale Funny Skeleton is a Mii costume. The dedication Sakurai and his team had for this game is unlike anything I've ever seen. And they ended things off with Sora from Kingdom Hearts, which really was the perfect way to finish the DLC. He was the most requested character from the Smash ballot all those years ago, and it's incredible that he's actually in Smash Bros. And then there's the stages. They remade all of them from the previous games outside of a small handful, plus there's a bunch of new ones on top of that. And if that's not enough, all these stages work in 8-player Smash, and there's Omega and Battlefield variants. Oh, and also, you can turn off the stage hazards and get rid of the annoying bosses. And I've honestly only scraped the surface, because there's so much more still. The online is the best it's ever been. For the most part, I've had really smooth matches, but that's going to depend on your internet, of course. Unlocking spirits can be done through the World of Light mode or with a spirit board. Spirits are kind of like Brawl stickers, except they have specialized battles attached to them. That's basically what you do in the World of Light. You fight a ton of spirits and get all the characters back. This is probably the weakest part of the game, because it has the same issue that Smash for Wii U had. These specialized spirit battles don't change things drastically. Basically, the spirit itself has a character or set of characters attached to it, and the attributes kind of match up with what the spirit is. So it's a fun idea, but it kind of just feels like you're playing regular matches with a few settings changed here and there. It's still fun though, and I really love the boss battles in World of Light as well. Sakurai brings back Galleon from the Subspace Emissary, you fight a frickin' Rathalos from Monster Hunter, Old School Ganon, Marks from the Kirby titles, and plenty more on top of that. These bosses feel really well integrated into the game compared to the previous titles. And I love how at the end of World of Light, you get to play as Master Hand briefly, and the fight where you take on Galeem and Darkon simultaneously is incredible. I kinda wish that the World of Light was built more like the Subspace Emissary with actual platforming stages, but I get why it wasn't, because that would have been an immense amount of effort trying to tie in over 70 base characters. Beyond that is a bunch of the usual single-player modes. The stadium events have been downscaled to fighting endless hordes of Miis, characters, or just the cruel variant. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense considering how many characters are included in Ultimate. The stage builder this time is also way more in-depth, and sharing them online is easier than ever. There's also a shop where you can buy spirits, over 1,000 songs to pick from with all the stages combined. The home run contest got a huge facelift, and classic mode is way better now. Each character has their own unique path which relates to them in some way. This is so much better than Smash for Wii U, and is on par with 64 and Melee's classic mode. This is a game I will continue to go back to for years to come. Just the fact that the gameplay is so smooth, and it has every character in basically every stage, this is the only Smash you'll ever need. If Sakurai ever makes another Smash game after this one, I got 2 words for you. Good luck, because not really sure how you're gonna top this. And after all of that, we just have to talk about Squarespace, which is today's sponsor. They're the best and most powerful place to create the slickest website. You can connect your audience and generate revenue through members-only content, manage members, send emails, and leverage audience insight, all on one easy-to-use platform. You can make a community on your website with a fully integrated commenting system that supports threaded comments, replies, and likes. Use their blocking tools to categorize, share, and schedule your posts too. And that's not even including Squarespace Extensions, a new third-party tool that lets you manage inventory, promote products, streamline bookkeeping, reconcile and file sales tax, and ship items across the globe. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Nathaniel to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Links in the description. Will Sakurai ever make a new game? Who knows, but there is one thing I can say. It's awesome that he's decided to make a YouTube channel and basically share his wealth of knowledge to the world for free. So thank you so much, Sakurai, and thank you for watching.